You know, in the history of ideas, you've got thinkers who lay a few bricks, and then you've got thinkers who design the entire building. Aristotle, well, he was an architect. His work laid out the actual blueprints for logic, for science, for ethics, ideas that would literally define Western thought for 2,000 years. So how on earth did one man manage to build the foundation for so much of our world? Let's dig in. Right, so that's the big question, isn't it? How did one person's mind create a system so complete, so all-encompassing, that it shaped how we argue, how we look at the natural world, and even how we think about what it means to live a truly good life? It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. So let's set the scene. Aristotle was born way back in 384 BCE, and his life story puts him right at the heart of the ancient world. For 20 years, think about that, 2 decades, he was the star student at Plato's Academy in Athens. And if that wasn't enough, he later became the personal tutor to a kid who would grow up to be Alexander the Great. Yeah, that Alexander. And it's this mix of deep, abstract philosophy and real-world power that really fueled his life's mission, to systematically explain, well, everything. But here's the thing. If you want to build something new, you usually have to tear something else down first. And Aristotle's biggest brick, his biggest challenge, was with his own teacher, Plato. And we're not talking about some minor disagreement here. No, this was a full-blown clash over the very nature of reality itself. Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. For Plato, the world we see and touch isn't the real world. It's just a shadow. The chair you're sitting on, just an imperfect copy of some perfect heavenly idea of chairness. Aristotle came along and was like, hold on. No, reality is this chair, right here. For him, the essence of a thing, its form, wasn't floating around in some other dimension. It's baked right into the physical stuff in front of us.
And this quote? Wow. This is basically his declaration of intellectual independence. It's such a powerful way of saying he was committed to following the evidence no matter where it led, even if that meant disagreeing with the man he'd studied under for 20 years. For Aristotle, truth wasn't out there somewhere. It was right here, in the world.
Okay, so if you decide that the real world is the physical world, you've got a new problem. How do you actually study it? You can't just stare at things. You need a method. You need a toolkit for taking reality apart and understanding how it all fits together. And Aristotle, he had to invent that toolkit from scratch. And here it is, the core of his intellectual toolkit. First, he gives us formal logic, a way to make sure our arguments actually make sense. Then you've got empirical science, basically a method for observing and classifying everything. And finally, the 4 causes, which is a framework for explaining why anything is the way it is. Let's break these down. It's kind of hard to imagine, but before Aristotle, arguments could be a real mess. He invented this thing called the syllogism, a super clean, structured way to reason. You've all heard the classic, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. See? If the first 2 parts are true, the conclusion has to be true. Now, this seems really simple to us today, but this was a revolutionary invention for clear thinking that basically dominated Western logic for 2,000 years. All right, next up is what might be his most powerful tool. For Aristotle, just saying you know something was, well, it was pretty shallow. To truly understand anything, he said you have to be able to answer 4 different kinds of why. A statue is the perfect example to see how this works. To understand it, you ask, 1, what's it made of? Marble. That's the material cause. 2, what's its shape or design? The form of Hercules. That's the formal cause. 3, what actually made it? The sculptor chipping away at the stone. That's the efficient cause. And 4, the big one. What is it for? What's its purpose? To inspire people, to be beautiful? That's its final cause, or what he called its telos. And for Aristotle, everything has a telos. Now, this amazing toolkit wasn't just for looking at statues or cataloging fish. Aristotle turned it inward to the most important question of all, us. He asked, what is the purpose, the telos, of a human being? And his answer became the absolute foundation of his ethics. The goal, he said, is eudaimonia. Now, you'll often see this translated as happiness, but honestly, that word is way too weak. Eudaimonia isn't just a good mood. It's more like human flourishing. It's about being the best version of yourself, living at your full potential. And, this part is key, it's not something you get, it's something you do. It's an activity. So how do you live this flourishing life? Well, Aristotle's most famous idea on this is the golden mean. He said that any virtue is just the perfect balance point, the middle path between 2 extremes or 2 vices.
Courage is the perfect example, right? On one end of the spectrum, you have a deficiency of courage. That's cowardice. On the other end, you have an excess of it. That's just recklessness. Virtue, true courage, is that sweet spot right in the middle. So the point isn't to follow a rigid rule book, it's to develop the wisdom to find the right balance in any given situation.
But, and this is a huge but, you can't be virtuous all by yourself, hiding out in a cave. Aristotle famously said that we are political animals, zoon politikon. He meant that we are literally designed to live in a community, a city, what he called a polis. It's only by being part of a society, through friendship and civic life, that we can actually practice these virtues and achieve that flourishing state of eudaimonia. Our personal well-being is completely tangled up with the health of our community.
So when you step back and look at this whole system, his logic, his science, his ethics, it's just breathtaking. It's so comprehensive. But honestly, the story of how these ideas managed to survive for over 2 millennia is almost as incredible as the ideas themselves. It's a real journey. Because after Aristotle died, a ton of his work was just lost to the Western world. For centuries, it was brilliant Islamic scholars in places like Baghdad and Cordoba who preserved, translated, and deeply studied his texts. It's because of them that his work was reintroduced to Europe in the Middle Ages. He became so influential they just called him the Philosopher. I mean, no last name needed. And get this, even though the scientific revolution would eventually prove his physics wrong, the very methods of logic and observation it used were built on the foundation Aristotle had laid. So, at the end of the day, Aristotle's entire massive project was really one big attempt to use reason to figure out the world and our place in it, to create a rational blueprint for a flourishing life. He gave us his answers about purpose and virtue and community, which kind of leaves us with one final thought. What would be in your blueprint?